Hi everyone, welcome to the Psychology of Dating podcast. You are listening to me, Nadine Newkirk. I am both a clinical psychologist and a dating coach. Before we jump into today's podcast episode, I've got some exciting news for the podcast. We have reached over 10,000 listens for the podcast. So today it is exactly 10,104 listens. So that is pretty incredible. And this is spread across 102 countries. So if anyone was having any thoughts about, am I alone in this, in my dating struggles, everyone else has got this and I'm the only one who can't do it, you are not alone in finding dating challenging. That there are people from 102 countries listening to just this podcast. And I thought it might be interesting for you all to hear a little bit about the stats of where people are listening from, top episodes, top cities. So the country with the highest number of listens is, or the continent is Oceania. So that's where Australia is held. That makes sense. That's 41%. Then we have North America, United States, 30%, Europe, we've got 21% of listeners there. And then we've got 3% from Asia, 2% from Africa, and South America, it actually says 0% on my stats, but when I look at the individual downloads, there's 66 downloads there. And then for the cities, we've got the top 10. So the first 4 in Australia, which again makes sense, me being from Sydney. So we've got Sydney, then Melbourne, then Perth, and then Brisbane. And the top 5 city is Berlin. And after that, we've got Denver, Colorado, San Francisco, California, back to an Australian city, Adelaide, and then we've got Auckland and Brussels. So I find it just so exciting to know where you're all listening from, who's tuning in. I thought it might be helpful for you listening just to kind of visualize who else is getting this information, who else is listening along with you. And if you're curious about top 5 episodes, ones that you might want to revisit or go to if you haven't listened to before, the number 1 listened episode is Attachment Styles and Dating, one of my earlier ones. Then we have Challenging Unhelpful Beliefs, Behavioral Experiments. This is an episode where I talk about, I had to do a challenge in my master's program, and this is where I did a funny dance. I just flailed my limbs and arms in the middle of a shopping centre to challenge some beliefs. So if you want to tune into that. Then the episode How to Tolerate Uncertainty, Dialectics and Dating. So dialectics is when you can have 2 opposing things true at the same time. That, I want to be with someone and at times I can feel so frustrated by them. And then the top 5 episode is, the 5th episode in the top 5 is Top Dating Coaching Advice, interview with Amber Gruberman. So this is actually my prior coach, who I did dating coaching with, then my prior mentor who helped me start up my dating coaching business and now friend. And she gives some really helpful insights and tips into dating. So if you haven't tuned to that, I highly recommend it. For today's episode, I'm really excited to invite my cousin, Hazel, onto the podcast. So Hazel's actually, I call her my twin cousin because our parents are twins and my mum had me in December, and then a year later, Hazel's mum, her twin, had another baby on the exact same day. So we actually share the same birthday but a year apart, which is pretty incredible for cousins. And I really want to get Hazel on the podcast because we were chatting at a family event and she was talking about all her experiences in dating with her now fiancé and how she had a period of breaking up and getting back together and what she'd learnt about that. And yeah, I thought this could be so helpful for all the listeners. So I'm inviting Hazel on to share a bit of her story, to get a real life human story on the podcast. So welcome, Hazel.
Thank you, Nadine. It's so exciting to be here. And yes, you are my twin cousin. Absolutely. Every year we wish each other twinning birthdays. Um, yeah, I'm just excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, could you tell the listeners a little bit about what your current, I guess, that you're engaged and what your story is with meeting Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ben and I met first through a mutual friend in 2013. He had actually seen me around and he had asked this mutual friend of ours to try and sort of get us together or put us on a blind date. And we'd met at a sort of an event, and then the next day he'd sort of asked me out and we'd gone on this date. And initially he was just a really lovely friend, really warm personality. I got on with him really well and we clicked. But I was sort of in this space where I was very young. I was in my early 20s. I was looking for some, like, I guess, excitement in a relationship, like chasing that big high and that rush and that adrenaline and all of those feelings that give you that
Mm-hmm.
spark. And Ben had sort of been, he's 6 years older than me. He's done business. And so he was a very like stable human. And so we ended up becoming really close friends and we stayed friends for about a year. And he kind of kept wanting to go to that next level. And I kept sort of keeping him in this friend zone.
Mm-hmm.
And when people were asking me, like, oh, why don't you date Ben? I was like, oh, he's shorter than me. Like, it was like such a defining feature that I was like, he is like, he's not hugely shorter than me, but he is a bit shorter than me.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of kept dancing backwards and forwards. I was going on dates during this time. And actually, he was the person that I would call after my date and we would like run through like how the date went. And so we
That
were
is
like,
hilarious. I love
yeah,
that.
so I was absolutely using him as like my buddy best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Was he
like
just saying there's something wrong with all the dates that you
he would just keep coming back to being like, why won't you date me? Like all these guys and they've got all these things wrong with them and you keep whinging about it. And then we're having such a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I kind of never felt that like huge spark. Like he never kind of did the whole like lean in and give me a kiss and we had this like fireworks or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a point where he said, like, come to Melbourne. We're gonna go and have this like holiday together. And I was like so like backwards and forwards. Like, I don't know if I want to give him the wrong idea, but I was really enjoying spending time with him. So we went down to Melbourne and I held his hand and I was like, oh, like this isn't weird. Like he's not so
Mm.
short that I don't know what I thought was going to happen when we were holding hands or something. But we were having such a great time. We sort of got a little bit more intimate on that trip. And I remember coming to this moment where I was like, right, I think we just give it a go and like come home. I think being in a different location, we both grew up here. So like not being around friends and sort of family and familiar places was really good.
Mm.
And then, yeah, we got together and we were together for 4 years. And then we had a breakdown of our relationship. And then 2 years later, we ended up getting back together. We've now been back together for 5 years and now we're engaged. And yeah, looking at a wedding in
Mm.
May next year.
Wow. Yeah, I love this because it's an example. I think sometimes people see it from movies. You meet someone, there's high sparks, and then that's it, happily ever after. And it's so, um, you know, helpful to hear actual real life stories where it is a bit rocky or you have stops and starts. And I actually want to go back to the little bit shorter because this is something that I hear from so many people that I see is their criteria of, I think there's this idea in society as well that a guy has to be way taller. You have to be able to wear heels and they're still taller than you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what do you think? Yeah, so you said you're not sure what your mindset was beforehand and then after. Can you kind of take a guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like when I look back, I think in that early this goes for our first sort of I call it like our like um first act of our relationship and our second act, but the whole
Mm-hmm,
time in that relationship, um I don't think I was really settled in myself. And so I was constantly looking at these criteria for other people and I would really hang on to those. Like, okay, did he say the wrong thing? Was he like a multitude of different things. And the shortness
mm-hmm,
sort of came in as like, oh no, I can't see myself with someone shorter. I saw myself with someone who was like big and strong and powerful, and
mm-hmm,
sort of like enveloping me. And I didn't
mm-hmm,
feel that that was something that he was able to give because of his height, when
mm-hmm.
really his love is so big and his the way that we have our relationship is he is my strength and he is this
Mm-hmm.
protector and he is all of the things that I've ever dreamed of and much more than somebody who would just be different in height. So it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make any like it doesn't change anything for us now. And it's not something that I'm like, oh, I can't wear heels around him or I can't dress up or I can't, I'm not conscious of the height difference at all now whatsoever. Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because a lot of people don't realize, they think it's the other person that gives you the feeling. So they have to be tall. So then I can feel, like, I've got someone who's powerful or strong, but it's actually our own thoughts which are creating our own feelings. And so you could have, 10 different people dating someone shorter, and you could have one person thinking, I've always been tall, so I always thought like, oh, I'll feel like a giant oaf, and I'll look awkward and be always hunched over, but those thoughts then make me feel self-conscious, and that's actually creating that feeling, not the other person. Then you could have, another person thinking, wow, how cool, we're such a, amazing power couple. Um, you know, Look at us, we're so confident, we don't care what society thinks, and they feel really strong and powerful with those thoughts. And it's actually just the thoughts that they've changed, not the actual circumstance of the person, the height that they are.
Which is exactly what happened in our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The first part of our relationship, those first 4 years, we had quite a difficult relationship. We started business within sort of a year of being together. We moved in fairly early.
Mm-hmm.
I had an affair on him. So we hit lots of those really big, sort of challenging times early on.
Mm-hmm.
In saying that, we've done the same sort of challenging stuff in this time, but it's never felt hard. We've had, huge ups and downs. We still have business together. We still ride those waves. We both work full time. We've had financial stress. We've had, um, life stresses. We've had relationships where we've had days where it's sort of like been a little bit harder, but we do it as such a team now, opposed to in the first part of that relationship. Um, I was really unhappy in who I was and I didn't love
Mm-hmm.
myself. And that caused so much grief because I was always looking for that exit plan. I honestly had one foot in, one foot out constantly. It was like I was going down the highway, and every time there was an exit sign, I was like, do I get off or do I stay? And so the
Mm-hmm.
only difference in us really getting back together and having a much healthier relationship was the relationship I had with myself. The
Mm-hmm.
time that I took away and we were in a break, I really worked on that with me. And I, fell in love with myself. I dated myself. I lived by myself. I got super, super intimate with like who I was, what I liked, what I didn't like. And I became so much more confident and self assured in who I am that when we did come back together, the depth of love and that well was so much deeper for me to offer to him, and it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
as scary. Like he used to, pour this love onto me and I would get really like almost scared or afraid of it. And I'd want to push it away. I would think like, man, I don't love myself this much. Like how could you possibly love it? There must be something wrong with you. And so
Do you
it was
think there
too
could have been a
big.
fear there as well, that if you fully relaxed into it, then there was a potential to get rejected? You're getting all this love and you don't want to lose it. So then if you're really vulnerable, what if there's one small part that they don't like about you, or a big part? And so it's better to, you know, hold yourself a little bit tighter just in case.
100%. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, like he was so stable and he was so consistent that terrified me in the beginning. I was
Mm-hmm.
still after this, chasing this sort of um, love that had some sparks and highs and lows. And like I was really addicted to like the drama roller coaster that is
Mm.
what you think, big loves are. They had to be grand and they couldn't just be like day to day living and finding those
Mm-hmm.
moments in those days which were special or they were filled with love, or all sorts of those things. Whereas now I love our stable life. Like we have so
Mm.
many days where like things happen, but it doesn't change anything underneath us. Like we're so our foundations are so strong. I feel like we live really independent lives, but we come together, we choose each other every single day. Um, it just feels so different. It's chalk and cheese. It was
Mm.
really interesting to have such a varied experience with the same person.
Mm-hmm. And that I think so many people have that notion of needing that high sparks, but then also it comes with the lows and the anxiety and the crashes of an unstable relationship. And I know when I was sitting, my dating coach, she gave me a really good analogy, which kind of shifted my mindset quite a lot. I just, I was kind of dating someone where it was that. But I kept going back and being like, oh, but it feels so good when we're together. And she said, okay, imagine you're out in the desert and you've been like trapped under a boulder for, quite a long time in the hot sun. And, you finally kind of break free and you see one person with like, you know, a dirty, muddy kind of bottle of water because I don't know, they've been lost too or something like that. And you like tackle them and you start sculling the water and it feels so good because you've been so thirsty. You're like, this is amazing. And you think that's what the amazing relationship is, but it's still a muddy bottle of water. It's
Yeah.
actually just that you've been deprived for so long. So sometimes, you get that big rush and relief because actually the person you're dating is, not being kind to you other times, or they're not replying to your messages, or, you're feeling in doubt, or it's not actually so stable. And when you have
Mm.
someone consistent, you don't have those high anxious or low periods. So you don't get that like burst of relief when you get like a little bit of something. But actually, it's more that slow, steady incline that grows and grows and grows and grows over time. And, you can still get those highs in a different way that don't come with that kind of anxious kind of craving.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's like even sort of in now, like you're saying that there's those daily highs. They are because, like one of the things that we still really invest in is our playtime. And so
Mm-hmm.
we have like massive buy-ins with each other where both of us like if someone wants to have like a little game of chasing each other around, it's like the other person will always engage in that. Doesn't matter if we're
Mm-hmm.
tired or like what's going on, if somebody's in the middle of doing paperwork or anything like that, the other person will get up and have these little buy-in moments. And it's like joy. It's like so much joy that you can feel so
Mm.
safe that that person's going to meet you in the place that you are at. Um, and it's fun. Like it's just so much more rewarding and so much more safe. My nervous system relaxed. I didn't think about my relationship 20,000 times a day. I wasn't like analyzing things. I don't do that anymore. I'm just like, we're here forever. We're here for the next 60 years. I'm invested in sort of the smaller hiccups don't mean anything across the broader spectrum of what our life is going to be. And so
Mm.
with that, I can make Ben feel a lot more safe because he's constantly not mirroring the fact that I'm thinking I'm going to leave. So he doesn't have to try and make every day the most perfect, wonderful day, which is exhausting. And then
Mm-hmm.
I can really relax into who I am and I can be my whole self and share all of the aspects of me. And I'm met with the same love and if not deeper love. So it's just
Mm.
created just this safety place where our home has been like whatever we bring from the world in the day, we can come home and we know that this is, this little pocket of safety for us both.
Oh, my heart's just getting all warm and fuzzy. Um, and it sounds like it's funny because it's like you're on that highway and you kept looking at the exit signs thinking, oh, if there's a slight rough day, that means I need to leave. And, then I'll feel safer if there's never like those rough points or I never have doubts. But actually now what you've done is you didn't have to get rid of the doubts. You didn't have to get rid of any of the bumpy days. You just kind of fully embraced it and said, whatever happens is here and I'm still in it.
Yeah,
And you like allow yourself to have it rather than trying to shove it down and just create this shiny, perfect thing that doesn't exist.
100%. And, even the bigger days, like we've had some, huge news come through and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
feel like it rocks our boat at all. It honestly just feels like I'm so happy that I have a partner and a team member that I get to do
Mm-hmm.
life with.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that comes in, I'm like, wow, like this is really tough, but hey, like we're going to get through it together. It doesn't mean that I like overload him with all of my drama or anything that's coming up for me. It's not his um, responsibility to solve my problems. We very much keep very independent lives. He has multiple businesses, I have businesses, and I work. Um, it just means that we will get through it together and we'll be able to lean on each other in times, but we don't kind of, fall into each other's lane and then really overrun that person or deplete them of their energy or ask for too much. It
Mm-hmm.
just feels really, um, really that we're standing side by side and really that holding that strength together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That as a team, as you said
Mm,
before. Yeah.
mm.
And, in a team, you don't need like, if you fall down on the soccer field, you don't need all the other players to suddenly fall down with you. That's not going to be
No,
helpful for the
that's right.
team. That's actually when you need the other team players to be strong and have their own self-care and be able to do things and then help pick you up. And then when they fall down, you've got the strength for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think the single best thing that I ever did for my life and for our relationship now was just learning to look after myself, learning how to love myself. Taking myself on a date was like one of the biggest eye openers. So in that period when we weren't dating and I was living by myself, I had days where I would go, okay, if I was going to take myself on a date, what would I do? What are my favorite things? Which was also hard. Like I didn't even really know what I liked. So I had to strip all of that back, work out on a list of like, what am I actually hobbies and things that make me super happy. And then I would go and like take myself on this beautiful day and I'd come home and then I would be like, okay, what does future Hazel want? What do you think future Hazel would really, really like? So maybe it would be like before I was going to work, I'd strip the bed and change the sheets so that coming home tired from work, I had invested in looking after myself in the future. And then it just started changing this whole relationship with myself. Like I was like, oh, I can be nice to myself. I can, have loving little treats that I leave out for myself. Where I've like, all these like
Mm-hmm.
little, yeah, like these nuggets
All
that
the
I
things
would
that you'd wish that, that shiny person you were dating would give to you, you were starting to give to yourself. Mm-hmm.
100%. And as soon as I was giving it to myself, it's like I don't need it from somebody else now. And in fact, I would rather just give it to myself. So now in our relationship, like Ben knows that I love alone time. It's super sacred to me. And so I have days where like I'll just go off and do my thing and I'll be away from people and I'll decompress and I'll come back and I'll be in this overflow, ready to give back to the relationship or show up for him. So it's just like knowing yourself. Like before, I didn't think I thought I was an extrovert all the time, but really I'm fairly
Mm-hmm.
introverted. I actually do need a lot of time to recharge. So it's just like that was the biggest thing for me, just learning to know myself, getting to know myself, falling in love, and then being able to be in a relationship where I wasn't just expecting them to look after me all the time.
Yeah, because we want to get into a relationship to be happy, understandably, and then we kind of expect that they give it to us rather than knowing exactly, your self-care, what you enjoy, how to look after yourself. And of course, partners still support, but there's not that pressure then that that's the only source of getting that, that you have your own well from within as well. So you mentioned taking yourself out on dates. You mentioned, sounds like there was some big kind of mindset shifts or self-love. Is there if anyone out there, is listening to this and they struggle with, self-critical thoughts, or was there anything that helped with like your mindset towards yourself, do you think?
Definitely. So I
Mm-hmm.
went, definitely picked up meditation. That was really helpful for me. I did a lot of embodiment work. I was working with sort of an energy um, mentor. And then also the actual one that sort of came all together and gave me like permission to be me was human design. So for me, I'd done all of this other like personal growth work. I was also seeing a counselor during that time, which was really helpful. So I was kind of going like, in this time period, I was like, right, I'm going to get myself sorted. I've had a really rough time sort of through the breakup. And then I was seeing somebody who was huge red flags and a narcissist, and that had broken down. And so I had to really rebuild from sort of the bottom, really. And so I was just accessing as many things that I could and all the modalities that I knew how to do, lots of grounding work. But the biggest one was human design. Once I learned my human design, I felt like it was just the like jigsaw piece that really opened up my eyes on the bigger picture of who I was. It gave me permission to know that like rest was okay. I had had a lot of stories around, being lazy if I was resting. If I wasn't like sort of doing 50,000 different things in a day, then I was not achieving enough. So there was a lot of those stories that I was tied to. And so just spent time just deconditioning from all of the things and stories in my life that I'd been attached to. And then
What is
now
human design for those who don't know what human design is?
so human design picks up over across of different modalities. A guy, Ra, it was like a channeled work that came through, and it was a system that he built and it uses chakras, I Ching, the Kabbalah, astrology. And so it kind of maps you based on your time of birth and place of birth. And then it'll give you like a body graph. And it essentially breaks people down into 5 different energy types: projectors, manifestors, generators, manifesting generators, and reflectors. And it's essentially just making it so that we don't all think that we have to conform. You know, as a projector, I need lots of rest. I'm not here to work long, long hours, 12 hours at a time. I'm here to do short, sharp bursts. I'm here to see and guide, and I'm here to bring that wisdom through. I think you're a generator. So for you, you'll find something that you really love, and it's like that gives you the energy. You've got this life force energy. So you can go and go and go, and it actually is feeding you. So like your work is super important to you, and you're a builder, you're a creator of the world. But you and I, if we started comparing ourselves, maybe I would feel really sort of crap, I suppose, when I'm standing next to you and you're going and I'm tired and I want to stop and you're going, oh, but this is great. I'm feeling really energized. So it kind of just breaks it down and helps you give permission to be you, essentially.
Yep. And get more balance, I guess, when, if someone notices or they may be feeling a bit stuck and lethargic in life, and how do they, what gets them going and energized? Or if someone's feeling like they're going, a bit frantic, but then they're burnt out and exhausted, how can they kind of slow down and get that balance in the middle?
Yeah. So I just think like the single best thing you can ever do in dating is just know yourself so intimately.
And it sounds like as well you like accessed other supports, and for people, you know, each different person, a different kind of therapy or tool will be useful. For one person, it might be Tai Chi or surfing. Another person, it might be a counselor, or it might be human design, or it might be another type of therapy. And it's really doing a little bit of exploring and finding exactly for that person what helps them and helps guide them, you know, to get where they want to go.
Absolutely. And because we are all different and we come with, you know, huge varying degrees of our past and like what we've experienced, and the way that we see the world, and you know all the stories that we have about ourselves or about you know other people, and all of those fears, they're all unique to us. So it's like finding that person or that modality that really helps you peel back the layers and like get back to the real story. Like I was really afraid. I was afraid to love myself, and I didn't love myself, and therefore I was making all of these other excuses on why Ben wasn't right in the first time around. You know, he wasn't doing this, he wasn't doing that, he didn't do the washing, he left housework to me, whatever it was all stories that I was creating. But basically, when I peeled it all back, it was like, I didn't love myself. I didn't understand why he would love me. And so I was just like dissolving this relationship before it even had a chance to get going.
And that reminds me of, I talk about the 5 elements which my dating coach gave me to help people to identify what's actually a core issue that's being flagged and they should listen to, versus what's something, you know, like, you know, difficulties with the washing that maybe in the long term isn't such a problem. And it sounds like for you two that you both have that growth mindset where you can have a problem and you can have that clash or something's not working, but you also have ways to shift and move forward. And since you've kind of committed and been all in, it allows you actually to have that growth mindset and just problem solve, you know, any issues that might arise.
Yeah, hugely. I mean, I was really vulnerable in that situation where I wasn't like, I didn't have very good confidence. I didn't love myself. And I was really vulnerable to be, I ended up getting involved with somebody who wasn't particularly a very nice person. And it wasn't a healthy relationship. It was exceptionally toxic. But when I look back, I think, well, now I probably wouldn't have been as susceptible to even starting that type of relationship. But I just had like gaping holes that this person saw and was like, I can feel that. Like, I can be your protector. I can tell you that you're really special. I can do all of those things. And I was really caught up in that story. And I really wanted that to be true. And it felt really exciting. And it was the spark that I had been feeling maybe wasn't, you know, as fireworky with Ben. And so like I just fell into that, and I was in a very toxic relationship when now it's like you look back and you're like, that was a carnival of red flags. And, you know, I was just there for it thinking that there was, you know, something wrong with me, or I wasn't good enough for this person. There was all of these stories that I had. Whereas I think now that I've done all of the sort of bigger work and peeled back the layers, I don't think I would ever be attracted to somebody like that. And I would really
Mm.
see those red flags and go, oh yeah, I'm going to stay away. That's toxic
Mm.
behavior.
What were some of the red flags now that you could see,
Very
to anyone
narcissistic
else?
behavior. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
straight away, very early on, now that I look back, um, started the relationship hot and heavy, like very quickly escalated into like big, deep I love yous from a very short period of time. Um, Feeling like it was like a drug, like when you're with this person, it felt like really good and you were in your own world. And then you'd step away and you'd have like big withdrawals and feeling like, oh, I just want to be back with this person. Lots of
Mm.
texting, but like texting to the point where it's like hundreds of times during the day, not allowing
Mm.
as much space in between those conversations, not allowing to have actual life. Um,
Mm.
Lots of drama. So
Sounds like it
catching
started to take up your independence as well, if you're constantly
hugely.
talking. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I got very isolated from my friends because they could see this behavior was not very good, but I was wrapped up in this story. Lots of victimhood from that person and dragging me into their drama. So there was lots of
Mm.
drama in their life. I was getting really caught up in the drama. When we would fight, it would be really heightened fighting, and then it would go away the next day. And it was as if nothing had
Mm.
happened, which was really strange for me. I'd never experienced that. There was no
Kind of
resolution,
gaslighting as well, kind of
massive
like,
gaslighting.
no, that doesn't matter. That wasn't something really big. And you're left with the feeling of that didn't feel so right. But then, they're acting normal. So you're like, just keep going along with it. Mm-hmm.
Lots of secrets. Now that I look back, I wasn't allowed to access any phone. His phone, he didn't like me seeing anything in like the letterbox or like mail was a secret. He had, passcodes on his phone that I wasn't able to see. There was lots of secret behavior,
Mm.
which now I look back and I'm like, whoa, like that was crazy. Like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was crazy. But he normalized a lot of it and it then normalized it for me. And it was really over a long period of time that actually I'll tell you the story if you have time. But this story was like the moment that I realized. So
Mm-hmm.
he would never commit to sort of seeing me during the week or the week ahead. And so we lived separately and like about 50 minutes away. So I would be trying to plan my week and he would be saying to me, oh no, I'm sorry, I can't commit to that. I can't, I don't know what's going on. So he would never commit to that. So it always felt like there was like this like moment of gaslighting. Like I was crazy for wanting this relationship. I was crazy for even thinking that a week or a month that we could actually plan anything. Which at that point I had normalized and I thought that that was like completely normal. And, I had stopped talking to my friends about it because they were telling me that this was quite bad behavior and often it would just put a wedge in between us. So I ended up
Mm-hmm.
taking a lot on and I was being very secretive as a person.
Mm.
So the relationship ended up breaking down, and I had knee surgery, and I had this lasting loan with Ben, and it was a car loan, and it was coming up, and we both needed a wet signature on this piece of paper. And so I hadn't spoken to Ben for about a year. And I remember calling him and I was like, hey, I'm so sorry to do this to you, but I am going to need like a signature off this piece of paper. And he was like, of course, like, no worries, I'll come down. He was like, do you need anything? I hear you've just had surgery. Like, can I come down and we'll sort this out? I can take you for a drive somewhere. We can go do it. And I remember like crying on the phone and I was like, oh my God, like he would just drop everything and like come and help me. And I was like, in this moment, I was like, whoa, my like baseline on what I expect is so low and had been like normalized to the point of like the dirt level that just one
Mm.
person doing this very normal, kind action had me in tears. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm not in a good place.
Mm.
And it was at
Mm-hmm.
that point I was like, okay, it's time to like work out and like unravel what has just gone on for the last couple of years. And how have I gotten myself into this point? And how have I allowed myself? I'm a smart person. I always thought I was an intelligent person. I thought, oh, there's no way anyone would be able to gaslight me. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't imagine myself as a like victim in any circumstance of anybody having like, coerced me. But I was. And
Mm.
I take full responsibility that I was active in it. But I also took responsibility of the fact that I was vulnerable enough because I didn't care about myself enough,
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
And also, I tell people that it's not based on age, it's not based on, um, you know, socioeconomic, it's not based on how intelligent someone is, that anyone can end up in an abusive relationship. And yeah, it's not the fault of someone, that there are, things that you can do to help protect yourself, like learning about flags or getting support from a counselor. And there are some things, to support people, but it is never the person's fault if they end up in an abusive relationship. And, it rests on the person who's abusive. But the problem is that they, most of the time, don't have enough insight, or they don't experience the guilt or shame that they should be feeling. So then the other person in the relationship often ends up taking all that guilt and blame and shame that should be the other person's.
Yeah, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like you just described that, the whole
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is making me just think I thought I want to do an episode of this, and I'm going to do it now, is actually talking through a wheel of, what a healthy relationship looks like, or versus like power and control, inequality, the difference between healthy or unhealthy relationships, because anyone can fall into it. Anyone, absolute psychologists, doctors, whatever profession. Like, yeah, it just goes across the
Yeah.
spread. And I think it's so helpful and courageous of you to share your story, because it shows others that they're not alone. Where often, as you said, it can become so secretive when someone's in a relationship like this, that they think I'm the only one. Or then when they can see, they have a moment where they see what's going on, then they're like, I don't want to tell people because I feel too embarrassed or ashamed. And I think the
Yeah.
more people hear regular stories of, another human who's intelligent, kind, smart, that it's not based on that.
No,
Yeah.
and I think like the biggest thing is the other person can make it feel like no one else, or like I think both of you, you're sitting in this bubble and you're like living in this really unhealthy and toxic relationship, but it's so secretive and it's so isolated from everyone else. You have no other points of normalcy. If you do tell anyone else and they go, "Hey, that's crazy," you then go, "Oh, but you don't understand. Like you don't understand. This is something that,
Mm-hmm.
he's never felt before. I've never felt before." Like, the whole mix of it, you keep thinking the other people don't know. They don't know how kind this person is. They don't know that, we share something that we've never had before. But it's
Mm.
actually kind of bullshit. Like when I peeled back the layers, I'm like, no, like what I have with Ben, that's special. That's the thing
Mm-hmm.
that feels so good, and it feels like it uplifts, and it is constantly just holding us in this space where we're loved and safe, and my nervous system can relax, and I'm not spending the
Mm-hmm.
nights, having terrible dreams or not sleeping, or my anxiety is like non-existent now. So
Mm.
yeah, I think having experienced both and having just seen and been in such like varied experiences and relationships, I would 100% go to bed every time. Like this guy is solid and a tree, and he's like
Mm-hmm.
going to give us growth, and we're going to be growing together for the rest of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's sacred, and that's what's special.
Yes. Kind and consistent. That's often
Kind and
something that's
consistent.
really dismissed for someone, but kind and consistent can give you the most beautiful relationship that you can ever get. But initially, if you're used to the highs and lows and the roller coaster, actually getting in a stable relationship, sometimes you can feel a bit numb, because you're
Mm,
not used to having, something that's just so steady. It can almost feel a bit boring for the nervous system. And so I think it's important for people to know that actually sometimes, if you've done, say the 5 elements, you can listen to my other episode on that if you don't know what it is, about like core deal breakers, and you're like, no, the key ingredients are there. This person's respectful, we've got friendship, you've got all those things, and you're having some, I'm not sure, then keep going for a little bit longer until you know it's a definite no or a yes, because sometimes give yourself, nervous system, a little bit of time to adjust and rejig and reboot. And
mhm.
then sometimes, if all the elements are there and you've given yourself nervous system that time, then sometimes that's where you can get the most beautiful relationships.
Absolutely. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
I think if you've got the basis of friendship, half of the job is done. Um, we are friends as well as lovers, as well as partners, as well as business partners. We have so many different hats that we wear as a couple, but ultimately, he's the person that I want to spend my day with, or he's the person I want to share my big news with. He's the one that I go to for advice. He's the one that, shows up to me, shows up for me in such beautiful ways every single day. And yeah, that's just like, that's the rest of it is just, yeah, history.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing your story. I do have a question, because I know that you touched on it, that that you cheated or that you're
Yeah.
unfaithful in the relationship. And again, I think that's so helpful and refreshing for people to hear that you know, can speak so openly about it, because I think it's not spoken about enough, where maybe someone who has cheated, they have so much fear or shame and they don't talk about it. Or someone who's been on the receiving end as well, they're like, oh, what's wrong with me that this happened? And they don't want to talk about it. And then people can't learn from it or move on from it or get like a lesson. And yeah, I was wondering if you have, you know, any insights of wisdom for someone who might be going through something like that.
I think if there's an element of when I was cheating, two things. I thought I was happy, and I was like, oh, I wonder why I'm really chasing this. And then what but what I realized is every single time that I had thought about cheating or I was engaged in that cheating activity, it was like it was such a self-sabotage because it made me feel worse about myself, that I didn't deserve Ben's love, that I couldn't be like capable of having a good relationship because I was a terrible person. And so therefore the only love that I deserved was this like broken love with this person who was terrible and had heaps of red flags. But I couldn't reconcile anyone loving me after I had cheated on them or had this affair. And interestingly, when we've come back together, I asked Ben, like, I said, oh, like, do you ever worry? Like, is there a trust issue? Has it been eroded away or anything? And he was like, no. He was like, I honestly see that you were looking for something in outside of our relationship because you were missing something within yourself. And he was also like, and I had some responsibility in that. We also were doing this like this life together, and there was flaws that maybe I wasn't showing up to the relationship in the right way, or I was over smothering you because I was worried you were going to leave. And so there was all these dynamics at play that probably both allowed that to blossom and have this affair. Whereas
Mm.
now, when I say to him, like, are you worried? He's like, no, not at all. Like, I feel your love. It feels different to me. You're so here, and I feel so safe that I don't worry about anything else that's going on. And I've never thought about straying again. It's not even something that crosses my mind because I'm so content and I'm not looking for any of those exits anymore. Like, I'm on this highway and we're going to a destination, and there's no part that I'm going to be like, I'm going to get off here. Thanks very much. But
Mm.
it's hard. It was really hard. He had found out. I didn't tell him. And so even in that, there was a point of shame that I hadn't even come forth. I hadn't stopped it. We had some horrendous times during that, when he found out, and how to work through it. We tried to stay together. We tried to work through it. Ultimately, it ended our relationship. We still continued to do business like for a year afterwards together, even though we were separated. So I think Ben's a really amazing person because he stayed very he kept staying for me. And even when we weren't together, people would be like, oh, you've got to move on. And he was like, no, like, I love this woman, and I think it's going to work out. Even though for me, I had been like, no, we're never going to come back together. I didn't even want to pursue that relationship ever again. But he had like thought to stay. And in his mind, we couldn't have started this second part of our relationship if there wasn't 100% forgiveness and there wasn't 100% trust back between us.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, it did take him a little while when we were getting back together. It took about 6 months for him to really trust that I was going to stay, and that I wasn't going to go. And so there was those initial 6 months where we were dating, and we actually started to go back through like proper dating. And
Mm.
all of the elements of that, where I was like falling in love with him again, and he was like, I don't know. And so we had to like negotiate all of those like fun kind of like first datey kind of things again. But then once we had gotten to the point where we both felt safe enough and we committed, then it hasn't been even an issue since. And nothing that we've really even thought about. We talk about it really openly. He obviously has my full permission. He's given me his permission to talk about it. And he will talk about it as well as something. So it doesn't feel like a big secret that we hold in our lives, that it's just this shame period. It's
Mm.
something that we've experienced, and it's made us better, stronger people together.
Yeah, it's amazing. As you're speaking, my thoughts are, wow, what an amazing like power couple. And, sometimes people will have this fear of sharing news like that or sharing vulnerabilities or, challenges in relationship because they think, oh, people will then judge us or never look at our relationship the same again. But actually the opposite can happen, that, if you can be, really forthright and share your story in the way that you guys do, actually it brings inspiration to others.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like
Mhm.
it's a badge of honor that we wear. It's part of who we are. We have ridden some really big stuff over the last 10 years together, and that has shaped us to who we are today. And so all of it gets to be on full display. It's not just the good, it can be the ugly lines as well.
hmm you mentioned that 6 months of building trust. Do you have any like tips on building trust for listeners?
Yeah, I think so when we first started getting back together, oh yes, actually, this was super interesting. So when we were getting back together, Ben notoriously is late. He does not ever show up on time. And he will not ever be organized until like the morning of something, which has been an interesting negotiating because I'm like a hyper fixed, like, let's get things done, super organized person. So we're going back together. He's asked me on like this third date, and we were supposed to be going to the range and looking at the sunset. And so I'm like calling and I'm like, hey, like, you're like not far off or something. He's like, oh no, I'm leaving. Like, and I was like, oh, straight away. This is from the last time we were together. He was always late. I couldn't rely on him to ever be on time. So trigger one happened up for me. He gets there. He hadn't really planned anything there. We had to stop on the way to pick up, the wine. And then he was trying to like go to the shops to get some plastic cups. And I was like, two, he hasn't planned this. He doesn't care about this
Mm.
at all. So we get there and we're watching the sunset and I'm gone quiet. So I've just completely withdrawn and I'm feeling really pissed off. And I'm like, this is just repeating all of the old patterns that we had in our first relationship that sucked. And he was like, all right, I can see you're upset. Let's talk about it. Don't go quiet. Let's not just have this period where we just like say, oh, well, it's not going to work. And he's like, what actually is upsetting you? And I was like, oh, I can't trust that you'll show up. You never plan anything, therefore you're not putting me first. You didn't really care about this date. It was the last thing you thought about on the bigger day. Business always comes first. And he said to me, are we not looking at the sunset? Are we not looking at the mountains? Like right now, we're having the exact moment and the date that you wanted. The way that I got here was the way I did it. It might not be the same way that you did it, but we've still gotten to the end goal and we're still looking at these beautiful mountains. Right now, you're choosing to kind of be in this like pissed off state. And now we're not coming together to share it. And I had this moment where I was like, oh, you know what? He's so different from me, but maybe that's a strength. Like maybe it's great not to date someone who's exactly the same as you. And you know what?
Mm.
It doesn't mean that he doesn't love me. It doesn't mean he didn't put me first. And it doesn't mean he didn't want to date me. I
Mm.
had to trust that his way of coming to that date was different from mine, but we still ended up together. And from
Hmm.
then on, I feel like I was able to trust him. I was able to trust his processes. And I was able to let go on this, like, you're doing it wrong. You should be doing it the way I want to be doing it. And so I
Hmm.
just allowed him to blossom into who he was. And he has full freedom. He will always be doing things on the morning of some big event. And it will always be stressing me out. But it's
Hmm.
also like the stress isn't mine to hold anymore. I'm like, oh, well, if that's the way you want to get it done, that's you. I'm going to get the parts that I
Mm.
have to get done organized earlier. But we always get to the end. There's always a wonderful event or there's always a wonderful moment at the end of those roads. And so I think once I was able to give him the freedom without the bitterness, and then he equally can do the same. Like he knows I'm neurotic about getting things organized. He's also not on me at that. And so
Mm.
it's like the freedom to just be totally who we are allows,
Mm.
there's like safety in that now. Now I don't have to try to be somebody else. He doesn't have to try and be someone else and then constantly disappoint or feel like there's this bitterness that I'm disappointed in the way that he's done things. So it's like,
Mm.
yeah, we're looking at having kids next year. And there was something that was like, don't be the expert. Like, don't be the person who becomes like so expert that you don't let the other person have their way of doing something. And I think I'm like, that's going to be so cool for us because he's going to do it so differently to the way that I would think to do it. But like now we've just got double ways of doing things. I don't see it as kind of like a bad thing anymore. I just embrace it.
Yes, I can relate to this so much with a young baby that, and I'm sure, lots of young parents can relate to this where you have a way of settling your baby and then you see your partner doing it, you're like, no, no, don't do it that way. They're not going to settle. Or you just want to jump in if the baby's crying and they're trying to settle. But really, actually, sometimes they'll stumble upon their own way, which then really helps because you can both learn from that. Or sometimes the babies respond differently to each different person. So even if you tried to just copy and paste your way to them, it wouldn't even be as effective. And yeah, there's actually something amazing about letting both people just navigate it their own way, share bits of wisdom, and you can take on what you want, but don't try and force, your specific techniques to the other person.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And some people's behavior, just like going back to creating safety, it's like some people's behaviors might be different to yours, but it doesn't mean what you think sometimes it means. Like him
Mm-hmm.
showing up, he had done the best he had did with the day he had, and he was still prioritizing coming to see me, regardless of the day
Mm.
he'd had. And so instead of I could be like, oh, well, you didn't prioritize it, you didn't plan it, you didn't sort your day out, I could then be like, wow, like he's chosen after a long, hard day to still come and he's 10 minutes late.
Mm-hmm.
Does that really matter? No, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it was for
Yeah.
me to just be like, all right, the projections I have, I'm challenging them. Like, does it mean what I think it means? Or maybe it could mean something else. And then
Mm.
referring back to him, being like, hey, like, I'm thinking this. And then he'd be like, whoa, no, like, that wasn't what my intention was. Like, not at all. This is how I was thinking. So actually verbalizing it instead of just me just internalizing it and going into my mind and thinking worst case scenario all the time.
Definitely. Because again, it comes down to like the circumstance is actually neutral and you could have 50 different couples in that same relationship with 50 different thoughts or stories or things that they're making up about it. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if there's a thought pattern saying they don't care because this, and this, and we take that as fact, of course it's going to be horrible in the relationship. And it's so
Yeah.
important to actually fact check in with the other person, and also start to just have a little bit of mindfulness of what are my automatic judgments and thoughts going on here, and what is like, if I was just to purely say fact, he was 10 minutes late. We are now at the park. When you say it like that, it suddenly doesn't have that big emotional intensity. But if we then add those judgment thoughts of like, he doesn't care and he's always late, that all or nothing thinking, when we're stressed, we
Yes.
start to be more black and white in our thoughts. And that just like fuels that intensity. Mm-hmm.
Yes. 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 Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I just want to end on one last point because I love that you said that you both prioritize play.
Mm.
And it actually reminded me my first ever placement for my master's program. I was working with families. I worked with 5 different families, and we're going through like core skills in parenting to help with challenging behaviors that might come up. And one of the skills that we actually taught was quality play. And that's where you would sit down, and whatever age the kid was, whether they're 8 or 11, you would sit down and not try and, teach them something like this is green and, try and infuse that. You wouldn't try and like control what type of things they were playing. You were just present, validating, creative, spontaneous, being with that person for half an hour. And that's what they would practice. And I remember my supervisor saying, if the parents forget every other skill that we did, and I can't remember, there was probably like 10 different skills, she said the main one is that quality time, because that's your currency. That's like your solid base. That's you connecting. And that means when you come across challenges, their relationship with their kid, you have that core base. And it sounds like you two are really prioritizing, even though you're really busy, you running businesses, independence, things like that. You're prioritizing having that like quality time together, which gives you a really good currency, a really good base.
Yeah. And we both like decided to buy in. So I know there's like huge studies around people who have long-term relationships and they're successful, and it's all about the buy-in. But so Ben
What do you
loves
mean
an
by buy-in?
buy-in, like so I think the study from memory, and I don't know if I'm going to get this right, but basically there was a bird at the window, and one couple was like, "Hey, there's a bird at the window," and the couple both looked and engaged about this bird. Oh wow, isn't it beautiful? Look at those feathers. Blah 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 blah. The second type was, oh, wow, there's a bird at the window. And the other person would go, mm-hmm, and not look up.
Mm.
Or they won't look up and then they look back down to whatever they're doing. And then the third couple was like, hey, there's a bird at the window. And the other person would just really not engage or like not listen or basically just have no interaction. And so
Mm-hmm.
they were looking at the study and they were saying that the couples that had the buy-in those moments, it was like a bid from one person, the other person would buy back in. They had
Mm-hmm.
this much more strong longevity in their relationship. And so, like for us, it's been as I don't even know how this started, but basically, one of us will like play. So, we might get up and then they look at each other and we'll like start walking, and the other person will get up and start following. And we play like follow the leader around the house. And it sounds really silly and it's like so
Sounds so cute.
childish, but it's something that no matter what we're doing, if he gets up or I get up, the other person will follow. And so it's like we
Mm-hmm.
have this like real, we can be doing busy work or not feeling connected. And the other person might be like, hey, I'm feeling a bit like this. And so it plays the game. And then the other person will buy back in and they buy into this moment. And so then we're giggling and we're having fun and we're chasing each other around the house. And it might last for like a minute or 2 minutes
Mm-hmm.
max. And then we can go back to what we're doing. But it's creating this like repetitive nature that, hey, if I'm asking you for something, you're going to come and meet me in this place.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't do it in a way of like, the difference is, I don't ever say to him, I kind of used to be like, oh, I'm struggling. I need your help. But it was like daily. And that person, the buy-in is like, come on, man, like sort your shit out. Like you've got to
Mm-hmm.
help me help you. But these are like fun, short, sharp, playful days, moments in
Mm.
time that we can come together, have a connection, have a giggle, and then continue on our day.
I love that. And no matter how busy you are, when you know it's just a few seconds, it's just a minute, then you can actually really be like, okay, yep. And you get that little short break. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I love it.
Yeah. It's kind of like, yeah, it's better than asking for like the big thing all the time.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't
Hmm.
know. But then, like, if I do ask for it, I'm like, hey, Ben, I'm like really struggling. He's like, oh, cool. Like, I'm here for you. This doesn't come
Hmm.
around like every single day, but like, okay, I'm here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That reminds me, I was just cracking up as you're speaking about one of the things that my partner and I do is we love making silly names for each other, for our baby, like nicknames, and we like always escalate. One person says it and the other person like adds to it. And I had a pimple on my neck yesterday, and we came up with a name, Nancy Pimplernickel. But just like that was both of us combined coming in for the whole day. We kept like cracking up and like bringing it up again. It would only take a few seconds, but like that was just our thing. We just like love making up silly names and
And that's it. That's
yeah.
your like bid and buy-in. It's
Hmm.
like you both coming together, no matter like what stresses are going on. It's like
Hmm.
let's come up with something fun. And it'll be
Yeah.
different for everyone, but like, yeah.
Well, thank you so, so much. Honestly, you've shared so many different, challenges and growth that a relationship can have. And I know that so many people out there will be relating to some of this or learning so much from it. So really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that story.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been so wonderful to chat to you.